Get tied to the mic over here. Well, good evening, everyone. If you are getting dinner, please continue to get dinner. I'm just going to start the process so that we use our time effectively, but don't feel like you have to be here and super attentive right now. Continue getting your dinner. So we are going to start our sustainable budget team meeting. Lovingly, we are calling it the SBT, our SBT number 5 today. And we are going to be talking about our staffing ratios, and I'll go into what that means and what we're looking at in just a bit. But before we do that, I'm going to review. Can we get that TV on too? I'm going to review what we have been working on and what our commitments are, just so that we all start on the same page. And then, do we have a click? Is this clicker the one that'll work? Oh, great. Okay. So our recently adopted vision and mission, we read this at every board meeting before every board presentation, and we also read this prior to meetings that we have at the district level. Our vision at Pajaro Valley Unified School District is that every student will graduate ready to share their unique skills and abilities and be a positive, contributing member of the community and their world. So that's our lofty, overreaching goal that we'd like to have. Our mission statement is that we are committed to cultivating a nurturing environment where every student thrives academically, socially, and emotionally, empowering them to flourish in a dynamic and ever-changing world. And here is our SBT team by name and by membership. Thank you all for being here yet another evening, some true dedication. Purpose of our team is that we're going to collectively recommend to the Board of Education how we use our resources to best serve students and maintain fiscal solvency in the face of declining enrollment over the next decade. The presentation to the board will be done by the SBT in the first January 2025 board meeting. Our norms that we all co-created on our very first meeting is that students are our top priority. We use our equity of voice. Each of us are equal at this table. We're going to listen to understand, not listen to respond. Be brave and ask questions. This is a safe space where people are empowered to use their voice and feel comfortable sharing. We're going to honor the diversity of community and assume positive intent. I think these team norms are going to be really critical for today. Today will perhaps be one of the more challenging days that we have together, or evenings, I should say. Our problem statement is that we are facing a significant challenge due to declining enrollment and the loss of one-time pandemic funding. To address this issue, we must reprioritize and reimagine our services to scale effectively and maximize available resources. Our goal is to maintain high-quality educational offerings while ensuring equitable access for all students. To achieve this, we must implement solutions with transparency, ultimately positioning our district for success in a sustainable manner. And I want to emphasize 2 pieces of this statement is that we're looking at 2 things that are kind of occurring for us simultaneously, and that is the declining enrollment and the fact that we really didn't make decisions to adjust our staffing based on declining enrollment, because that was happening and coming to a critical point during COVID. And that was not a time when we would have been looking to right-size our district, because we needed all the supports for staff and for students at that time. We are also looking at the sunsetting of our ESSER dollars that were used to mitigate the impact of COVID. And so those 2 things are the lens we need to look at our decision-making through. We are, when we have to make a decision, going to use the FIST to 5 method. We've used it several times to help create our problem statement, to create our team norms, and also to create how we're going to guide ourselves through making the decisions we have to make. So the Fist of 5, I know we all know it well. And we're using the 7-step problem-solving model to help to solve the declining enrollment and sunsetting ESSER dollars situation that we find ourselves in. And we are still on step number 2, and I want to reiterate that for this evening. We will be making no decisions or recommendations this evening. We're still in the process of providing information. At our last meeting, I was asked for, well, how come this data wasn't included or that data wasn't included? We're not including all of everything because we would never leave this table again. We would age here. We're including the things that we chose to implement with ESSER funding to help our students and our staff. And we are looking at the declining enrollment that we did not address at the times we may have started to because of COVID. So everything that we're looking at was somehow impacted by ESSER dollars or declining enrollment. So we're not looking at the totality of everything, but particularly with the lens of those two things. And this aligns to our district goals. These district goals will be different the next time we come to you. We are bringing the new set of district goals that had input from hundreds of people forward to the board next Wednesday for approval. And so these will most likely be changing. Our LCAP goals will stay the same. The LCAP goals are those goals, and if you remember, we've talked about them lots of times. It stands for Local Control Accountability Plan. That's the plan that we use to identify the actions and strategies that we engage in to support student learning. That plan is a 3-year plan. It can change over the course of the 3 years and make adjustments, but then it would be a revision process. So this is not changing for now. I wanted to use that. And then we determined through our FISTA 5 and through some collaborative workspaces, our core for this team, our core values for allocating resources. And those core values included that we would make things student-centered. So the lens that we use for every decision we're making here is what is the ultimate impact to students. We also said that we would ensure equity and access for our students, that we recognize that students have different needs and different challenges, and that we make decisions to help support those needs and challenges as well. That we were going to prioritize our core educational goals, and that we would consider what would be long-term investments. And we're not talking about long-term investments where we're making more money. We're talking about long-term investments that will help our students continue to learn at high levels. We ranked some of our priorities, 7 of them, 2 meetings ago, and then this was the poll that we used, and here is our ranking of priorities. And so as we make our continued decisions or look towards recommendations, we want to make sure they align with how we prioritized our educational programming. So we decided as a team that teaching and learning and the core education as defined by Ed Code is number 1. And number 2, we prioritize the visual and performing arts. Number 3 was enrichment opportunities like athletics, outdoor activities, and field trips. And mental health was number 4. Career and college connections were number 5. Family resources, number 6. And educational options such as different learning opportunities or styles of learning like online learning programs was last. Last week, I shared this with you. This is the California framework for educating our students. The framework really delegates to us the things that we teach and how we spend our time. And as you can see, the 3 outdoor circles are math and science, and then English language arts. And other parts of the curriculum that we teach our students are integrated through that framework. Last week, we also looked at how the health of our district is in terms of student performance as measured by our California accountability model. That model is what we are every year testing our students to see how their performance is. And as you can see, our students in PVUSD are struggling in the area of English language arts and math, and that we are struggling even compared to districts with similar demographics and of similar size. We talked about that a little bit at our last meeting. This is new, so now you have some new information in front of you. The California dashboard, as I said, is our accountability measure. Districts are monitored by the state of California for their performance, and if their performance in many areas is below expectations, then you enter into a program called differentiated assistance. Pajaro Valley Unified School District is in differentiated assistance, and it's actually called differentiated assistance 2.5, which means we have persistently underperformed in key areas for 3 or more years. So if you see across that dashboard, the areas that are monitored are English language arts, math, our English learner progress, our chronic absenteeism, our graduation rate, our pupil engagement. So pupil engagement is that chronic absenteeism and the graduation rate. That's all in one bundle. And then school climate, which is suspension. We also look at what are our college and career outcomes. College and career outcomes means that are our students leaving our system in what is deemed prepared. And there are different markers of preparedness that students need to meet as per the California dashboard. What we want to note here is that if you see colors of red, those are areas where we are significantly underperforming. The areas in orange are areas that have maybe had some improvement, but they're still concerned areas. Yellow is also kind of a medium. You're doing not great, but you're not, in the red. And then green is something that you would want to see more of. Okay, so broken up on the far left side is the student group. One of the things that I really value of the California dashboard is that we monitor how our student groups are doing. So it's not just looking at the whole, but when we break down these different scores, are there particular student groups that are performing better or worse than others? And that helps the school district to really hone in on how is that educational programming hitting or landing on or affecting and impacting a particular student group. And you do have this in front of you, so you could do your own I notices and wonders, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move us on. This is important data because we have to make decisions that will impact what we are most responsible for our students, and that is their academics. And I really appreciate this group because you identified that is our number one. Teaching and learning is our number one, and all of our actions and strategies should align to meet this number one goal. We talked about last time the instructional time requirements for minutes. We put this in here because these are our state requirement of minutes. We have to meet this as per the state at each of the grade levels and grade spans. And with only a certain number of minutes per day, per week, per school year, we have to make sure that we're maximizing our time with our students. So this is an important consideration as we look to make recommendations to the Board of Education regarding our programming. Okay, now we are getting into the new stuff. Before we get, I'm going to go back one so that we don't distract ourselves. We'll stay on the minutes for a minute. That was no pun intended. So as we move forward, we're going to be looking at how do we staff our sites. We're going to look at our current staffing in some key areas, And then we're going to look at some recommendations that we're already making just at the district level, some things that we see that and changes that we can make that we've already started to look for implementation. There's only really one area where we know we need to adjust. The other areas are all going to be areas that we are not making a determination on tonight. We are looking at it as I notice, I wonder, what are some things we might think about there? And I want to remind everyone of what I've said multiple times. We can do anything. Our district can do anything. What we can't do is everything. And with the onset of the COVID dollars, the ESSER funding, as well as not yet adjusting completely to our declining enrollment, we have a lot in the system, and we do need to look at those adjustments, okay? But again, tonight is informational. We're just ensuring that we have a very deep understanding of how we're staffing in PVUSD. Okay, so this is the one area that we have already made some recommendations for next year, and that is our number of site administrators. So what you see on the left side are the staffing ratios for our site administrators at the elementary level. Currently, we have 33 full-time equivalents for our elementary schools. We have one principal, and each site has an academic coordinator. One of the recommendations a consultant made for us, and this was the consultant that you heard on the second day of our meeting together, was that we did need to look at staffing ratios. And so we've taken that seriously, and we've begun to work on that. So what the one part that we know we need to move forward with for next year, and we did an abundance of research looking at how other districts are staffed, how other like-sized districts are staffed, as well as what are some recommendations through different research entities. We have made the conclusion that each site has a principal, that's standard, that if an elementary site has more than 500 students, they would have a full-time academic coordinator. If they have between 300 to 500 students, that would recommend a part-time, a 1/2 FTE academic coordinator. And under 300 students, you would not have an academic coordinator at your school site. This is a best practice. There are other additional funding sources that a school site could engage in if they felt that they needed to staff differently. And those funding sources are funding sources designed to help support students who may need more supports. For a variety of reasons. We call those our title dollars. So sites can determine through their process where they meet with school site council to add an additional 0.5 to create a full-time position, but that would be a site decision and a site expense. So the difference here where we see ourselves as being overstaffed is 8 full-time equivalents. At the secondary level, we have 22 full-time employees, administrators, and our staffing ratios from all the research we did is that every junior high and high school would have a principal. At the high school level, it is very common to have 3 assistant, sometimes called associate principals, because of the duties that the associate principals do. And that if that school site's over 2,500 students, so a larger high school would have an additional assistant principal for a total of 4. At the junior high level, we would see 1 principal generally and 1 assistant principal for the school sites of our size. And so the difference there is 0. We're operating at a standard level of staffing. We also took a look at the number of counselors that we have in the district. There are recommendations for how we staff counseling, and that is usually by a number of student to full-time person ratio. So the recommended through a organization called ASCA. ASCA is counselors, Academic Counselors School Association, is 250 students per every one counselor. In California, that is not actually the case. That's not common to have 250 to 1. The average in California is 464 students per one academic counselor. Currently, we're staffing under the California average at 338 students per one academic counselor. The difference there would be 7 FTE. And I want to reiterate, when we're saying these different staffing ratios, aside from the very first one, we are not making any decisions. We're just trying to demonstrate where we may have some overstaffing. It could be that this team says, no, this is what we need, this is what our students deserve, and this will be helpful for our students, and it will improve their outcomes. And then we leave things as is. So just know that these are just to get an understanding of what we're currently doing. Yes, Sue.
This is academic counselors, not social media.
These are academic counselors, and just so I know we're not all educators at the table, academic counselors, probably the most familiarity anyone at the table would have with the academic counseling is these are the staff usually at high school sites that students see. Their purpose and what they do is look at student scheduling, getting students aligned to their classes, ensuring that students are getting all of their credits, making sure that students are following a course like being A through G, which would be college-bound course, or maybe completing a CTE pathway. They support students when students are struggling in their classes and help to connect to families and teachers. Academic counselors have knowledge of many different practices in terms of student support services. Probably all of us sitting at this table at one time interfaced with our high school counselors for a schedule change, maybe. They help to do that too. Nellie?
Our high school counselors also do like college prep type workshops for students as well. So it's not just the academic scheduling and working with students when they're navigating through a life crisis of any kind as well.
Yeah. They do a lot to make sure, even helping with college applications, filling out FAFSAs. Those can be very complex, and the college counselors help with that. Yeah. And don't worry, I do want to assure you, I'm just going through the information and presenting it. You will have time to ask questions, to talk, and to discuss, and to work in small groups. Okay, this is our staffing ratio formulas for our site clerical. Did I skip a slide at all? No. Okay. So this is how we're staffed, and then how we are recommending staffing. So at the elementary level, our current minimum is 1 office manager and 1 office assistant. The recommended staffing ratio for an elementary school from the research looking at like-sized schools and districts is 1 office manager and 1 office assistant. In middle school, we have 1 office manager and an attendance specialist. And the recommendations that we found were at middle school, we would have 1 full-time employee per 275 pupils. So we are recommending the 1 office manager and 1 attendance specialist. Seems to be appropriate. At the high school level, we have 1 office manager, an attendance specialist, a registrar, and account specialist. And the high school recommendations are 1 FTE per 300 pupils, which equates roughly to how we're staffing. 1 office manager, 1 attendance specialist, a registrar, and an account specialist. I do want to add that if you are out and about and around sites, you may notice additional staffing. Sites do, using title dollars, choose to sometimes fund additional positions because they've noticed that that's a need at a school site. For instance, if a school maybe has, when we looked at the dashboard, a high chronic absentee rate, they may choose through their title dollars to add an additional attendance specialist for outreach to families and communities to help students in that area because that was an indicated need. So you may see more, but this is all general fund staffing, and everything that we've been delving into with this work group has been general fund driven. Okay, and then we have our staffing ratios for teachers. Our staffing ratios for teachers are bound by a couple of things. There are recommendations per the California Department of Education, but there is also the teacher contract. We are not looking at nor willing to make any changes to the teacher contract. That's not this group's job at all. This is not a negotiations table. We're just looking at how our staffing works because we did say we would talk about staffing ratios. Yes.
Are substitute teachers included in teaching staff
No.
dollars? No, that's a separate deal.
Oh, from general fund, yes. But it comes from different, it's a whole separate thing, not something, yeah. That's a complex answer, actually. So in our actual ratios per our contract, our agreement with our teachers is that at TK, we have 1 to 20. Our K through third grade is 1 to 24, so one teacher per 24 students. Our fourth grade is 1 to 32, and our fifth through sixth grade is 1 to 34. In secondary, we have one teacher per every 35 students, and in PE, it's 1 per every 50 students. Per recommendations from the California Department of Education, they recommend, and actually it's a little deeper, this is actually a law, 1 to 20 at TK, 1 to 33 at kindergarten, in first through sixth, 1 to 32, and in secondary, 1 to 35, and for PE, 1 to 50. The recommendation, and people might be pausing and going, wait a minute, that's wrong. It's not 1 to 33 for kindergarten, second, and third. That is a recommendation unless you are in class size reduction and that you are a district that engages in class size reduction. And that means that you run the smaller class sizes that you see on the left-hand side. We are a class size reduction district. So we have smaller class sizes. We also have teacher release. Teacher release is a program to give teachers time within the school day to prepare for their classroom, whether it's creating amazing lesson plans, engaging in lesson study, grading papers, entering grades for report cards. There are many, many tasks that teachers do that are beyond just teaching in front of the student and with the student. So we have a release time program, and that release time is per contract, and that is 150 minutes. Every teacher in TK through kinder receive 150 minutes of release time. During that release time, another teacher who's certificated comes into the classroom to teach the students to provide that release time. In first through third, teachers receive 120 minutes a week. In fourth through fifth, it's 150 minutes a week. And currently, the number of full-time teachers who provide release in this district is 34.65. If we look at our numbers of students sitting in the seats and we divide out how many would be needed to provide that release time, and also looking at the number of teachers we have, we would need 19 full-time teachers to provide that release, a little over 19, closer to 20. So the difference in release time teachers that are currently providing release versus what the need is 14.8 FTE. The release, then this is, parents in the room might be wondering, what is the release, what does the students get? What are they being taught when a teacher leaves the classroom to do the things that they have to do for teaching? They receive either music and art instruction, PE instruction, or science instruction. And this teacher release programming is a common practice across the state. the way the release is received for students, the teaching that they get, tends to vary per school district. We also have intervention teachers. The intervention teachers are teachers who help to support students who may not be able to access completely the Tier 1 or the base curriculum. So they may need some extra help or support in reading or in math or other areas as determined by the teacher. And so the intervention teachers help to target the gaps of instruction or learning that a student might have. So in our district, we have 36 full-time, 36 and a little bit more, full-time intervention teachers. The average number of intervention teachers per site is 2.25. When we researched what was common for a school site to have in terms of intervention, we looked at two pieces of information. One, what were districts in similar size and demographics as us? What were they doing at their school sites? And then we also looked at what we call our pyramid of student success. And that's when we look at Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 students. Tier 1 students are students who do well without additional supports. They're accessing the curriculum. They maybe don't need a lot of intervention, either academically or social emotionally. And generally, in most populations, you would find that would be about 80% of the students don't need that extra support. A Tier 2 student is about 15% of the students who do need some additional supports from time to time, not long term, but maybe they struggle for a little bit because multiplying is just really hard for them in third grade, and they need some extra support to grasp onto that concept. And so it's short term, and that's about 15% who would need that extra support. And then there's Tier 3 students. The Tier 3 students are intensive students who need a lot of extra support, either socially and emotionally, or academically. A Tier 3 student is usually a student who is receiving special education services if the challenges are academic, or who would be accessing a mental health clinician regularly if the challenges are social emotional. And so when we look at this research, the research suggests that for the size that we have at our schools, we would need one intervention teacher, and that a high need school might have an additional 0.5 intervention teacher at their school site. So we also, and this is now going to be Jenny's turn to look at, we also took a dive into how are we staffing for our facilities. We know that there is a direct correlation between a student's environment, both on the outside of school and the inside of school, and it is proven in research space that students perform better in environments that look nice. And so this is an important part of data for us as well in terms of academic achievement and the correlation. So Jenny's going to walk us through the staffing ratios that we looked at for our maintenance and operations side of the house.
So while we were evaluating staffing ratios, we wanted to also look at maintenance and operations. We got our recommendations from several professional industry sources. CASPO is one, California Association of School Business Officials. I also looked at resources and training materials provided by FICMAT, the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team, which is a state agency from CDE. So in our M&O department, we have three main teams or areas. So we have groundskeeping, our trades, maintenance and operations, and then our custodial team. So I'll go through each team one by one. So looking at our groundskeeping team, we currently have 17 FTE, of which I believe we have a vacancy right now. Looking at recommendations that are industry standards, it's about one FTE for every 20 acres. Looking at our acreage district-wide, we have about 553 acres. Some of that acreage does not require groundskeeping. It's either woods or hilly areas. So speaking with the team, we approximated about 80%. So that came out to about 444 acres require groundskeeping or upkeep. So looking at that, the recommended FTE would actually be 22 FTE based on the 444 acres, which looks like our district is under by about 5 FTE. One thing I wanted to note is our district does not use Roundup per board policy, and that does increase the impact on the grounds team. And looking at our trades team, so that is made up of several areas, including our carpenters, our painters, our HVAC, energy management, locksmith, masonry, plumbing, welding, maintenance specialists, and planning. Because we are a mid to large size district, we are very lucky that we're able to run a lot of these specialties in-house versus having to contract all of these jobs out. So we're actually able to save money by having experts within our own staff. We currently have 25 available full-time equivalents. That number does include currently 4 vacancies. Looking at the recommendation, looking at industry standards, it's about 1 FTE for every 55,000 square feet of building space. The total square footage district-wide is approximately 2.3 million square feet of building space. So looking at that, our recommended FTE is actually 41.8 FTE, which means that we are under by approximately 16.8 FTE. I think if you see our member of our MNO team out and about, please give them a big hand and a big thank you. Not only have they been maintaining as best as they can with all the work orders, but we also have to remember they've been dealing with the floods that happened, the historic floods, reopening PMS, as well as catching up on all of those ESSER and Measure L projects as well. So that was a huge undertaking in looking at the staffing. So thank you. And last, our custodial staffing ratio. So currently, we're staffing for elementary and middle schools, 1 full-time equivalent daytime, and 1 FTE for the nighttime. At our high schools, at Aptos High, we have 5 FTE, PV High School, 5 FTE, Watsonville High, 7 FTE, Renaissance, 1 FTE, DTI, 1 FTE, and the total district-wide is 91 FTE of custodial. Looking at recommendations per CASBO, it's looking at an average of 4 factors. So the 4 factors that we're averaging together is 1 custodian for every 325 students, 1 custodian for every 13 teachers, 1 custodian for every 13 classroom units, and 1 custodian for every 18,000 square feet of educational space. And then there's some additional factors that you're putting in, such as if a school site has less than 450 students, they get an additional 0.3 added into their average. And then there's a community use factor. So such as EA Hall, there are MOUs with the city and other organizations to use their turf field. So that's a community use factor. So looking at patterns across the board, it appears that our elementary sites, for the most part, are overstaffed on average by about half a FTE. And our 3 comprehensive high schools appear understaffed by about 1 FTE on average. One thing I did want to note is that we do have a roving crew that does offer additional support district-wide. So district-wide numbers, we look right on point for our custodial, just looking at between elementary and our secondary.
Okay. So we included that because we've been looking into what's happening for our facilities. And our facilities are a concern. And so as we've been studying ourselves, we start asking more and more questions. And so when we look at our facilities and their needs and some of where they are short, in terms of right sizing, that's a term used, like how are we staffing and how do we correctly staff our district? There is an area where we're actually short and not over. And we need to look at how do we make decisions to also help and support our long-term investments, because one of our long-term investments is our facilities. Okay, so lastly, we are looking at our capacity study is what we call it. These are numbers that indicate the capacity a school has for students, the number of students who could attend that school. With our declining enrollment, we have lost students, and so some of our facilities aren't being used or maximized fully because we don't have as many students, which means we don't have as many staff, and we have empty classrooms. So just to give you an idea of what it looks like across our district, we didn't go site by site. We just looked at the overall. So some sites may be close to capacity, and some may be way under capacity. But on the average, we have a capacity for 10,800 elementary students. So if we were fully enrolled and things were booming and we had all sorts of people suddenly enrolling into our district, we would max out at the elementary level currently at 10,000 students. You may ask, well, what does the district do when that happens? That's when portables come in to help to increase the capacity at a campus. So our current enrollment now is 6,945 elementary students. So our excess capacity is 3,856 students across all of our sites at the elementary level. So if you break that into percentage-wise, we are using 64% of our current capacity. In middle schools, we have a capacity for 5,091 students. And I should mention this is determined by looking at the space recommendation in a classroom for number of students, the number of students that could be in a classroom space. That's how we determine that. So currently in middle school, we have 3,029 middle school students. So our excess capacity there is 2,062 students. So for middle schools, we are at a capacity of 59.5%. And then we have our high schools. Our high school capacity is 7,311 students. We currently have 4,859 students enrolled. So our excess capacity is 2,452 students, leaving us at a capacity of 66%. So these numbers are useful for us for a variety of reasons. It helps us to understand where, what level we're operating at. We do have many sites that are being underutilized. And where that comes into play sometimes is what Jenny's talking about too, is there's a lot of sites to take care of. And so I know last March, there was discussion, a presentation given to the board by school services where they did talk about school closures. And that in times of huge declining enrollment, school districts do have to sometimes make the tough decision of school closures. And so I know that this team has even brought up, are we here for school closure? We're not foreseeing that for next year, but it is something that as we reimagine and reprioritize ourselves, people might think through or play with different ideas of what if or could we. One thing that was recommended at that school services meeting, I was not here, had not been hired yet. That meeting, they were just saying, here's actions that districts take. There was no real recommendation except for one. And that was that an easy solution sometimes to things is to close classrooms, not schools. The reason why you would look at closing classrooms is because if you close classrooms, those are less rooms that you turn lights on for, that you heat, that you air condition, less rooms that you spend cleaning every night. And so that is that is the one strategy that they recommended. And it's something probably to think about, how are we using our space? Because we have this habit in schools of encroaching and using the space for students, like a wellness room, or let's do a extra staff room on this side of the campus because that makes it easier for staff, which it does. It's great. But that is something, to consider. So.
Are these numbers including the charter schools and Renaissance and New School and it's?
We did not include charters.
But New School and Renaissance, they are. Okay.
New School is, and Renaissance, yes, correct. Okay, so we are at, go ahead, Sue, yes.
I was just gonna ask, is it possible to see what the, current enrollment and per grade per school? Do we have that information?
Yeah, we did not bring that information this evening, but if that is something we want to look at next, we absolutely can. And what we can do is, Andrea, do you mind, can you put a Post-it and start a parking lot? We'll do our parking lot method where you can put a Post-it and say, I'm requesting this for our next meeting. Are there any other questions, comments? Okay, then what we're going to do is, this is a lot of information. I think there's a lot to think about and digest here. So I am going to give you 13 minutes, so from now until 7 o'clock, to just sit where you're at, look through the PowerPoint. You might want to think back. I see some people came prepared with the past presentations of all the information we've provided so far. You can make notes on your paper. Jenny and myself will roam around and see if you have questions, but just take the next 13 minutes to just kind of digest all this presentation. And after that, we're going to do some group work. Okay, so 13 minutes. You can talk with your elbow partner, but we're not making it into groups right now. Okay, we are 3 minutes over that time, but there were some good conversations going on. Okay, what I'm going to have you do is go into the groups that you have been working in, because I think everyone has gotten a little bit of a rapport and a pace going. We're going to give you the big Post-its as per usual. We're going to ask you to do 2 things that are the same as last time and 1 thing different. So the 2 things we want you to do the same are the I notices and the I wonders. Okay, so I just had a great notice from Nellie. Nellie said, hey, I want to know, is this square footage that was include all district facilities or just school site facilities? So that was a great I notice and follow up for us next. So the I notices and the I wonders, you're going to record them. And then the thing that's different that I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to start imagining new or innovative approaches to some of what we've learned so far. One of the things that we said we were going to do was we were going to reimagine solutions. And so I think the old solutions that we usually see in districts when we have to address funding deficits is cuts, right? Lay off teachers, lay off support staff, close schools, what all the different other, don't spend as much here, this program goes. And we always think in terms of deficit. But maybe this group can think of other things that are maybe not deficit based. Maybe it's something that we can do differently, better, that maybe still presents a cost savings, or could be a cost earning somewhere. And I don't know what those things might be. I'm just suggesting that I think this group is a highly creative and highly intelligent group from all the work that we've done and that I've seen on your Post-its. And I just want to challenge you to use that innovative site to come up and reimagine. And no part of reimagining is crazy or outlandish, because something might be like, oh my gosh, that would be like, or we're going to fly a whole entire school to the moon. That sounds really crazy and probably outlandish. But maybe there's some like little tiny nugget there that actually stems some kind of new thoughts or thinking. So reach for the moon on this exercise, okay? We're going to have 25 minutes to engage in this way. And again, it's I notice, I wonder, and maybe some creative and innovative thinking around our approach to our budget team. Okay, any questions? Andrea, I can hear her in the background putting up posters, I think. Yes, so there she has them pointed out. You know your groups. I think the group that usually goes in this corner can go to that corner, our group that goes over here, and so on. And Jenny and I and Andrea will be circulating around in case you have questions or even just to hear some of your thoughts. Okay, let's go. All right, let us all come to the table. Diana, we get the next update tomorrow at 4. I know, our bond counsels told me, like, don't be, could go either way. I know, just. All right, if everyone will join us back, we'll talk about the next steps. So we do want to hear everyone's thinking and do a gallery walk, but I noticed some of the posters are, some of the innovative ideas maybe didn't get recorded, but there was good discussion. And so what we're going to do this time is I would like one person from each group to be the spokesperson for their groups, and they're going to stand at their poster. So nominate someone, and I'm going to be looking to see who's moseying over to their poster, be the spokesperson. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Sue. Ellie, I think you're getting to be your spokesperson. Thank you. Gus nominated you. Okay, I see a missing. Okay, Mr. Floor. All right. Okay, now in your group, you are going to go clockwise to the poster that was next to yours to hear the spokesperson speak. And each station you go to, you'll get 3 minutes, okay? So right now, like if you were this group over here, you are now going to move to that group to hear Nellie talk about the discussion that happened there. If you were a member of Nellie's group, which is Gus all by yourself, everyone's going to talk to just Gus. Gus gets private audiences today. You are going to go over to the one next there, okay? And so on and so on. So 3 minutes, and I'm going to be timing. And go. All right, we are all returning to our seats because we have 3.5 minutes before 8 o'clock hits, and I want to get all of you home. All right. So you'll see up on the television is the sessions and the session dates. You'll notice that last time we had staffing ratios, but then realized we had to put too much onto one date, and so we moved the staffing ratios to today. So 11-6 were the staffing ratios and the organization of schools. And by organization of schools, we were looking at like that capacity size. Next time, we won't meet next Wednesday. You have a Wednesday off. Yeah. I know, probably kind of mixed reviews, huh? This has been so much fun. We don't have a Wednesday off, though, Jenny, just so you know. Probably Nellie doesn't either, or Mike, Gus, Diana. We have board meetings. Yeah. But our next meeting will be on November 20th, right before our Thanksgiving, where we have the next week off. And
We might have to change the last one because our board meeting changed.
oh, yeah, and we will need to make one additional change. That's to the 12:10 meeting, or the 12:18 meeting. I'm sorry, that ended up being, is now a board meeting date. We had to change due to some legal things with when you could hold your organizational board meeting. So we will let you know by tomorrow what that change will be so that you can plan. That will be a really important meeting. The last meeting of ours will be the most important meeting perhaps. Okay, but for next time, I am actually assigning homework to each and every one of you. So you have next Wednesday off, but you have a homework assignment. So maybe you use that dedicated time to complete the homework assignment. One of the things that we said we wanted to do was reprioritize and reimagine ourselves so that we were, in essence, a high-performing school district. And there are many school districts out there that are doing really great things. And sometimes in education, we are doing the same thing and we feel good about it and we forget about like, oh, maybe we should still be exploring other best practices or other change ideas. So the homework assignment is for you to research a high-performing district and a strategy or a programming or a standalone program that high-performing district is doing. And you are going to bring that research back to this table at our next meeting so that we can share some ideas and do a little bit of brainstorming before we look at what will be our last piece, and that is attracting and retaining students and staff. And in my experience, amazing programming and different change ideas do help to retain staff because they get enthused and excited about what they're involved in. It also helps to attract staff, like, oh, I want to go to that district because I can work in such and such. And it helps students as well because generally those programs are designed to engage students. I don't know what that research might look like. I can give you a couple of examples. I have been involved once with a school that was underperforming and wanted to perform at a higher level. They did some research and they found what later became their sister school. That sister school had some unique programming sequencing for high school students that was proving to be very effective in retaining students at the high school level, keeping students there, not dropping them out and graduating them. And so they started that course sequencing process and then saw great growth. So it doesn't have to be a huge change idea, it could just be something small. We will be sending you an email tomorrow by noon that will have the instructions of what we want you to research, and we will also give you some recommendations for where to look that are like reputable, or you can always also just Google, like maybe you're interested in, I think our students would love a culinary program. So you could always Google culinary programs and see what comes up. Just some thoughts, but you'll have written instructions, ideas of how to access research and resources, and then you have a due date, and we will give you that due date in writing, but that due date will be November 18th. And what is due on November 18th is just a little overview of your research, tiny overview, so that Jenny and I can build it into our slide deck to present to all of you so that everyone sees here's what was found out, here is something we might want to think about. Okay? Any questions on that? Absolutely.
So one of the groups brought up something that I thought was really important. So I was thinking maybe if you guys have time, you could do a little homework and get some information back for us.
Absolutely.
And what's missing from this whole discussion about staffing ratios is the staffing ratios that are in this building.
I saw that.
The
We will bring that,
directors
yeah.
and
And
okay.
actually, that was an oversight because we have talked about that and looked at that.
Cool.
And I don't even know why we didn't bring that in there. So thank you. We will get that to you. Absolutely. Okay, questions, comments? You are going to get written instructions, so don't feel like you have to commit it to memory. Okay. Well, thank you for another wonderful evening, some great discussion, good thoughts, and we have some nice follow-ups to engage in. So have a great night, everyone.